In a kingdom in Europe, with trees all around, there lived a young princess who had just been crowned. Her mother was queen, her father of course king, and they loved their daughter, but here was the thing. Law states in the kingdom that once she is crowned, the princess must marry an eligible bachelor from town. So the men from their town would all gather at once to see which lucky man would become the new prince. But why a peasant, you ask, that the princess must wed? Well, back in the day, the old law said that royalty must marry royalty so that nobody plain could enter the throne and bring the country shame. But the last time that was done, things didn't work out well. One kingdom wanted total power, and so both kingdoms fell. So once a new one was built, and the kingdom was fine, the new law was written regarding the next royalty in line. But back to the present, so when the time came, the men would gather in the square to play the love game. Well, maybe game's not quite right. It was more of a test, to find the handsome prince that would be the best. The princess would judge on the 3 tests they would give, and finally choose the prince with whom she would forever live. The first test was to see if the men were strong. There were many eliminated, so they kept moving along. The next test was used to test the men's brains. Once that test was done, only 2 men remained. The last test was the one that was needed to pass to become the new prince and be of high class. Both princes met first, alone with the king, who gave them instructions on manners and things. Most of the meeting was boring, nothing the men didn't know, until the king said the words that made the princes go whoa. The king made it clear that the swords on the wall were not to be touched, not ever, not at all. No matter the circumstance, the swords were to stay on the wall in the hall. That order they must obey. For if this order was disobeyed, out of the competition they would be, and the other man would get the princess for all eternity. So now with those orders, both men go have tea with the princess of their dreams and hopefully wife-to-be. They were having a grand time when out in the hall they heard the queen scream, which they knew was not good at all. They all ran for the corridor, but before they arrived, the door burst open and a man ran inside. He snatched up the princess and held up his sword. "Nobody follow me," he screamed, and he ran out the door. "Help!" cried the princess. "Please, one of you, save me. Grab a sword off the wall and help set me free." The men knew quite well that the swords must stay there, so the one man obeyed the king in fear of not providing an heir. Now the other man knew that if he grabbed the sword, that he would be disqualified, and that was the final accord. But with the cries from the princess and the love that he felt, he decided right then that he was going to help. So he grabbed the sword and fought to set her free, while the other man in the room jumped up and down with glee. "I win," he said. "You disobeyed the king, so the princess is mine and you lose everything." "Not quite," said a voice, and the men spun around to see the king and the queen, so they both bowed down. "Rise," said the king. "So, young man, I do see that you touched the sword to set my daughter free. And you," addressing the other, "you did as I said. You didn't touch the sword, therefore you should be the one to wed. But see, here's the thing, that was the final test. I wanted to see who loved my daughter the best. One of you was obedient and did as you were told. The other was loyal to my daughter, which was extremely bold. Technically you should lose, as you disobeyed me, but with that simple act you showed true fidelity. Fidelity and obedience are 2 different things, and by being loyal you saved my darling daughter," said the king. "And while yes, young sir, you were obedient to me, the other was loyal to my daughter, and because so set her free. And by the power vested in me being King Marcel, I proclaim that the man who was obedient loses. I bid thee farewell. Now you, sir, the loyal, it looks like you've won. So go marry my daughter. Congratulations, my son. But before you get married, there's one thing I must say, and it has to do with the last competition this day. Obedience simply means you follow through with an act. You only commit a part of yourself, and that's that. But fidelity is different. You commit all of you to the act that you fulfill, and therefore your feelings are true." And with true feelings put forth in his fidelity for her, the prince and the princess got married and lived happily ever after.